The cold metal floor pressed against Minji's knees as she scrubbed the same section for the third time. Her hands were raw and bleeding, but she kept moving the worn brush back and forth. The Takeshi guard standing behind her would hit her with his weapon if she stopped. She had learned that lesson 2 months ago. Around her, dozens of other women worked in silence. The only sounds were brushes against metal, heavy breathing, and the occasional cough. Speaking was forbidden during work hours. The Takeshi did not like noise from their prisoners. Minji glanced sideways at Hana, who was working 3 meters away. The medical officer looked thinner than yesterday. They all did. The daily rations were barely enough to keep them alive. Just enough so they could work. Not enough to give them strength to fight back. 6 months had passed since the Takeshi ships appeared in the sky above their colony. Minji remembered that day clearly. She had been coordinating the defense systems when the first blast hit. The colony's shields failed in minutes. The Takeshi technology was far more advanced than anything humans had. The invasion took less than a day. The Takeshi soldiers moved through the colony like a machine, rounding up everyone. They separated the men from the women. Minji never saw her brother again. She hoped he was still alive somewhere. The Takeshi took all the women to this facility on Epsilon 7, a small moon orbiting a dead planet. The building was massive, made of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Inside, there were rows of cells, work areas, and interrogation rooms. 200 women lived here now. At least, that's how many started. Some had died. Some had been taken away and never returned. The guards called themselves the Takeshi Imperial Forces. They looked almost human, but not quite. Their skin had a faint blue tint, and their eyes were larger and completely black. They were taller and stronger than most humans. They wore black uniforms with red symbols that Minji didn't understand. What confused Minji most was their culture. The Takeshi followed rules and traditions that seemed similar to ancient Japanese customs. They valued honor and discipline. They performed ceremonies before meals, yet they showed no honor in how they treated their prisoners. The guard behind Minji kicked her shoulder. She had stopped moving without realizing it. Pain shot through her arm, but she didn't cry out. Showing pain only made things worse. She started scrubbing again, faster this time. When the work bell finally rang, Minji stood up slowly. Her legs were stiff and her back ached. The women formed a line and walked toward the dining hall. No one spoke. The guards watched everything. The dining hall was a large room with metal tables bolted to the floor. The women sat in assigned seats. Minji's group included Hana, Somin, Yuna, and Jisoo. They had become close over the months, finding small ways to support each other without attracting attention. A Takeshi server placed a tray in front of each woman. The food was always the same. A gray paste that tasted like nothing, a small piece of dried protein, and a cup of water. Minji ate slowly, making it last. She had learned to appreciate every bite. Hana leaned forward slightly and whispered, barely moving her lips. Minji nodded slightly. The fever had killed 6 women last month. Without proper medicine, there was little Hana could do. The Takeshi provided minimal medical supplies, only enough to keep the workforce functional. Across the table, Somin's eyes were focused on the corner of the room. She was always watching, always thinking. Before the invasion, she had been one of the colony's best engineers. Now she spent her time observing guard patterns, noting shift changes, studying the facility's layout. Minji wasn't sure why. Escape seemed impossible. Young Yuna sat next to Somin, eating mechanically. The girl had been a university student before the war. She was only 19. The experience had changed her. She barely spoke anymore. Even during the few moments when speaking was allowed, Jisoo finished her food and placed her hands flat on the table, a signal they had developed. It meant she had information to share. Later, during the brief rest period, she would find a way to tell them. The dining hall door opened, and Commander Yamashiro entered. The entire room fell silent. Even the guards stood straighter. Yamashiro was the facility's leader, a high-ranking Takeshi officer with silver markings on his uniform. He rarely appeared in the common areas. Yamashiro walked slowly through the hall, his black eyes scanning the prisoners. When he passed Minji's table, he stopped. His gaze fixed on her for a long moment. Minji kept her eyes down, her heart pounding. After what felt like forever, he moved on. Once Yamashiro left, the tension eased slightly. The meal period ended, and the women were led back to their cell blocks. The cells were small, designed for 2 people, but holding 4. Minji shared hers with Hana, Somen, and Yuna. As soon as the cell door closed, they had a few minutes before lights out. This was their only time to talk freely. "What did Jisoo want to tell us?" Hana asked quietly. Minji shook her head. "We'll find out tomorrow. She's in the next cell. We can't risk talking through the walls tonight. The guards are checking more frequently." Somen sat on her bunk, her eyes distant. "I've been counting the guard rotations. There's a pattern. Every 7 days, they're short 1 guard in the east corridor for approximately 40 minutes. "What good does that do us?" Yuna asked, her voice flat. "Even if we got past 1 corridor, there are 50 more guards between us and any exit. And where would we go? We're on a moon. There are no ships." "No." Somen didn't answer. She just kept thinking. Minji lay down on her bunk and stared at the ceiling. She understood Yuna's despair. Most days, hope seemed foolish. But Minji had made herself a promise on the day they were captured. She would survive. She would help others survive. And somehow, someday, they would go home. Through the small window in their cell, she could see stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere were the human worlds that were still free. The Takeshi had conquered the outer rim colonies easily, but they hadn't reached the core systems yet. Minji wondered if anyone was still fighting. She wondered if humanity would survive this war, or if the Takeshi would eventually crush them all. The lights went out, plunging the cell into darkness. Tomorrow would be another day of scrubbing floors, eating gray paste, and trying not to attract attention. Another day of survival. It was all they had, but Minji held on to one thought as she fell asleep. They were still human. The Takeshi could imprison their bodies, but they couldn't break their spirits. Not completely. Not yet. The morning alarm blasted through the cell block at exactly 600 hours. Minji woke instantly, as she always did now. Her body had learned to respond to the sound without thought. She sat up and saw her cellmates doing the same. Their movements were mechanical, practiced through months of routine. The winter cycle had started on Epsilon 7 3 weeks ago. The facility's temperature had dropped significantly. The Takeshi gave them thin blankets, but no additional clothing. At night, the 4 women huddled together for warmth. Some prisoners in other cells had died from the cold. They dressed in their gray work uniforms and lined up for morning count. The guards walked through, checking numbers. One guard stopped at their cell and stared at Yuna for a long moment. The young woman kept her eyes down, trembling slightly. Finally, the guard moved on. After count, they were led to the washing area. The water was ice cold. Minji washed her face and hands quickly, trying not to think about the bathrooms back home, where water was warm and plentiful. At breakfast, Jisoo managed to sit at their table. She looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "I was in the processing building yesterday," Jisoo whispered as she ate. "I heard 2 guards talking. They said something about the core worlds. They said there was heavy fighting near Mars." Minji's heart jumped. Mars was close to Earth. If fighting had reached there, it meant humanity was still resisting. But it also meant the Takeshi were advancing deeper into human territory. "Did they say who was winning?" Jisoo shook her head. "They stopped talking when they saw me." The conversation ended as a guard walked past. They finished eating in silence. The day proceeded like every other day. Work assignments, Hours of physical labor, a small lunch, more work. Minji spent the afternoon in the recycling plant, sorting waste materials. It was mindless work that left her alone with her thoughts. At 1600 hours, something unusual happened. The work bell rang early. The guards ordered all prisoners to stop immediately and proceed to the main yard. Confusion spread through the facility. The main yard was only used for special announcements. The last time they had been called there was 3 months ago, when Commander Yamashiro announced new punishment rules. The women filed into the yard slowly. It was a large, open space surrounded by high walls. Guard towers stood at each corner. The Takeshi had positioned additional soldiers around the perimeter today. Minji counted at least 50 guards, all armed. Fear rippled through the crowd. This many guards meant something serious. Commander Yamashiro stood on a raised platform at the front of the yard. Next to him was a device Minji recognized as a universal translator. The Takeshi usually didn't bother with translators. They gave orders, and the prisoners were expected to obey. "This is a trap," Salmon whispered next to Minji. "They're going to execute us." "Quiet," Minji warned, though the same thought had crossed her mind. When all 200 women were assembled, Yamashiro activated the translator. His voice came through in perfect Korean, though his mouth moved differently. "Prisoners of colony designation, 732, he began. His tone was formal, almost ceremonial. "I am authorized by the Takeshi Imperial Command to inform you of a significant development." The yard was completely silent. Every woman stared at the commander. As of 6 standard days ago, formal hostilities between the Takeshi Empire and the Human Federation have ceased. A treaty has been signed. The war is over. Minji's brain struggled to process the words. The war was over? That couldn't be right. The Takeshi were winning. They had conquered dozens of colonies. How could it be over? Yamashiro continued. Under the terms of the treaty, all prisoners are to be released and returned to human territory. You may go home. The words hung in the air like poison. You may go home. It was impossible. It had to be a lie. No one moved. No one spoke. The prisoners stared at Yamashiro, with expressions ranging from confusion to terror. "Processing for release will begin tomorrow morning," Yamashiro said. "You will be transported to the neutral station at Proxima 4, where human representatives will receive you. That is all. Ram. When to Proxima? 1 Proxima. And to P2, where there will see that ATD." He stepped down from the platform and left the yard. The guards remained in position, watching the prisoners carefully. Still, no one moved. The silence stretched on. Finally, a woman near the front fell to her knees and started crying. Not tears of joy, but tears of fear and confusion. Others joined her. "It's a trick," someone said loudly. "They're going to kill us." "Why would they announce it first?" another woman argued. "If they wanted us dead, they'd just do it. Maybe they want to see who believes it. Maybe they're testing us." The yard erupted in frightened voices. The guards shouted for silence, but the women couldn't stop talking. Minji turned to her group. Hana's face was pale. Somin looked suspicious. Yuna was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "Do you think it's true?" "I don't know," Minji admitted. "It doesn't make sense." "Nothing about this makes sense," Somin said. "The Takeshi were winning. Why would they sign a treaty?" The guards finally restored order and led the prisoners back to their cell blocks. But the questions continued. In every cell, women debated what the announcement meant. That night, Minji's cell was filled with tense discussion. "I want to believe it," Hana said. "I want to believe we can go home. But I'm afraid to hope." "It's definitely a trap," Somin insisted. "Think about it. They gather us all together, tell us we're free, and see who steps forward first. Those people will disappear. It's psychological warfare. Main way. R5. But what if it's real? Yuna's voice was desperate. What if the war really is over? What if we could see our families again? Minji sat quietly, thinking. She had learned to trust her instincts over the past 6 months. Right now, those instincts were confused. The announcement had felt genuine. Yamashiro's tone had been formal, official, but it still seemed impossible. Did you see the guards' faces? Hana asked suddenly. They looked different today. Less hostile. Almost uncomfortable. Minji had noticed that too. The guards had seemed uneasy during the announcement, avoiding eye contact with the prisoners. We need information, Minji said. Real information. Tomorrow, we watch carefully. We see what happens to the first group that gets processed. We don't volunteer for anything. We wait and observe. The others agreed. It was the only safe plan. As the night deepened, Minji lay awake in her bunk. Through the small window, she could see the stars again. Somewhere out there was home. Somewhere was the life she used to have. The possibility of return was tantalizing, but the fear of it being a cruel trick was overwhelming. She thought about what Yamashiro had said. The war is over. You may go home. 5 simple words that could mean everything or nothing. Tomorrow they would begin to learn the truth. Minji closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. In cells throughout the facility, 200 women lay awake, caught between desperate hope and terrified doubt. The night passed slowly, each hour feeling like days. 3 days had passed since Commander Yamashiro's announcement. 3 days of waiting, watching, and fear. The women whispered constantly, theories spreading through the cell blocks like wildfire. Some believed the announcement was real. Most thought it was a trap. Everyone was terrified. On the morning of the 4th day, the guards came for the first group. Minji was in the washing area when she heard the commotion. She rushed back to the main corridor and saw 10 women being led toward the east wing. The prisoners moved slowly, reluctantly. Guards surrounded them. Other women watched from their cells, faces pressed against the bars. Where are they taking them? Someone called out. A guard shouted for silence. Minji recognized 2 women in the group. One was a teacher from her colony. The other was a young mechanic she had worked with before the invasion. Both looked terrified. The group disappeared through a heavy door. The sound of the door closing echoed through the corridor. Then, silence. Hours passed. No one knew what was happening. Work assignments were delayed. The women were kept in their cell blocks, which was unusual. The guards seemed tense, speaking to each other in hushed tones. Minji paced her cell, unable to sit still. Hana sat on her bunk, hands clasped tightly. Salmon stood by the window, watching the yard below. Yuna was curled up in the corner, rocking slightly. They're dead, Salmon said flatly. All 10 of them. They were taken to be executed. You don't know that, Hana argued, though her voice lacked conviction. What else could it be? It's been 5 hours. If they were really being released, we would have heard something by now. Minji wanted to disagree, but she couldn't find the words. The silence from the east wing felt ominous. Lunch came and went. The women ate mechanically, no one speaking. The dining hall felt like a funeral. Then, at approximately 1500 hours, something happened. A sound echoed through the facility. It was mechanical, electronic. Minji had never heard it before. Other women looked around in confusion. That's the communication system, Salmon said, standing up suddenly. I've seen the equipment in the processing building. That's an incoming quantum message. The guards suddenly became very active, rushing through the corridors. One stopped at Minji's cell and barked an order. Commander Yamashiro requires your presence. Now. Minji's blood went cold. Being summoned by the commander was never good. She glanced at her cellmates, trying to show courage she didn't feel, then followed the guard. She was taken to a room she had never seen before. It was some kind of communication center, filled with screens and equipment. Commander Yamashiro stood in the center, his expression unreadable. Next to him was a Takeshi officer with captain markings. Several other prisoners were also there. About 20 women in total. "Do not speak unless addressed," Yamashiro commanded. He activated a large screen on the wall. The screen flickered to life. A face appeared. A human face. It was the mechanic who had been taken that morning. Minji's heart nearly stopped. The woman on the screen was crying, but she was smiling. Behind her was a ship interior. Other humans moved in the background, wearing uniforms Minji didn't recognize. "My name is Park Yoonji," the woman said, her voice breaking. "I'm on a transport ship, heading to the neutral station. They really let us go. We're going home. We're really going home." The room erupted. The prisoners gasped, some crying out. The guards shouted for order, but even they seemed uncertain. Yamashiro turned off the screen. "That is sufficient. You have your verification. The release is genuine." "How?" Minji heard herself ask. The word came out, before she could stop it. Yamashiro's dark eyes fixed on her. For a moment, she thought he would have her punished for speaking without permission. Instead, he simply stared. The Takeshi captain stepped forward. His rank insignia identified him as Captain Ito. He was younger than Yamashiro, his expression less rigid. "The commander has authorized me to provide an explanation," Captain Ito said, his translator producing Korean words. "The war is over because humanity won." The words made no sense. "Humanity won? How was that possible?" "That is incorrect," one of the prisoners said. "You conquered our colonies. You have superior technology. How could we have won?" Captain Ito looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Yamashiro, who nodded slightly. "We conquered your outer rim colonies easily," Captain Ito admitted. "Our technology was superior. Our tactics were proven. We expected total victory. Within 6 months." "What happened?" Minji asked. "You did," Captain Ito said simply. "Humanity happened." He activated a display showing a star map. Red markers indicated Takeshi-controlled territory. Blue markers showed human worlds. "After we took your outer colonies, we advanced toward your core systems. We expected the same easy victories. But you adapted. Every world we attacked, you defended differently. You studied our tactics and changed yours. When we conquered a system, you learned from the defeat and never made the same mistake twice." The captain's voice carried something that sounded almost like respect. "On colony designation 773, you used guerrilla tactics we had never encountered. You hid among your civilian population. You struck our supply lines and disappeared. It took us 3 months to secure that one world, and when we finally did, half our forces were damaged." He changed the display, showing more battle information. "On the mining stations near Jupiter, you captured our ships and reverse-engineered our technology. Within weeks, you were using our own weapons against us. Our technological advantage disappeared. At Mars, you assembled a fleet from damaged ships and colony defense forces that shouldn't have been able to function together. Your coordination was chaotic, inefficient, but you won anyway through sheer determination." Minji listened, barely breathing. The story sounded impossible. "The Takeshi Empire has conquered 17 different species across this galaxy," Captain Ito continued. "We have never lost a war. We have never signed a peace treaty from a position of weakness. Until now. You defeated us," he said quietly. "Not with superior technology. Not with better tactics. You defeated us because you refused to accept defeat. Every world we took, you fought harder for the next one. Every ship we destroyed, you built 2 more. You learned from every mistake. You adapted to every situation." He turned to face the prisoners directly. "We studied your species before the invasion. We found you weak. Your individual strength is less than ours. Your technology was behind ours. Your military discipline was inferior to ours. By every logical calculation, we should have crushed you easily. But we didn't understand something about humans. You don't accept the impossible. You see a problem that has no solution, and you create one. You face defeat and turn it into learning. You take our strengths and make them irrelevant through adaptation. The room was completely silent. 6 months ago, we controlled 30% of human space. 3 months ago, that number was 15%. Last month, it was 5%. You pushed us back, world by world, battle by battle. Our command realized that continuing the war would result in our eventual defeat. So we signed the treaty. Yamashiro spoke then, his voice cold. The captain has explained the military situation. I will add only this. I have served the Takeshi Empire for 40 years. I have never known defeat. It is a dishonor I cannot bear. With that, the commander left the room. Captain Ito watched him go, then turned back to the prisoners. Processing for release will continue tomorrow. Groups of 20 will be transported each day until all are returned. You have my word that no harm will come to you. The women were escorted back to their cells. Minji walked in a daze. Her mind struggled to process everything she had heard. When she returned to her cellmates rushed to her. What happened? Minji sat down slowly on her bunk. Then she told them everything. When she finished, no one spoke for a long time. We won, Hana finally whispered. We actually won. Yuna was crying again. But this time, with joy. Even Salmon looked stunned. That night, word spread through the entire facility. The impossible had happened. Humanity had defeated the Takeshi Empire. They were going home. The releases continued over the next week. Every day, 20 women left the facility. Every day, confirmation messages came back. They were really going home. The impossible was becoming real. Minji watched each group leave with mixed emotions. Relief that they were escaping this place. Anxiety about when her turn would come. And something else. Something she hadn't expected to feel. Uncertainty about what came next. The atmosphere in the facility changed. The guards were less aggressive. Some avoided looking at the prisoners entirely. Others seemed almost apologetic in their movements. The daily work assignments continued, but without the previous brutality. On the 8th day, Minji's group was called for processing. Her heart pounded as they walked through the corridors one last time. Hana held her hand tightly. Salmon walked with straight shoulders, trying to maintain dignity. Yuna looked stunned, as if she couldn't believe it was real. They were taken to the processing building and given their personal items that had been confiscated during capture. Minji held her identification card and looked at the picture. The woman in the photo seemed like a stranger. She had been different 6 months ago. They all had been. While waiting for final clearance, something unexpected happened. A disturbance echoed from another room. Raised voices. The sound of something falling. Minji and the others exchanged worried glances. Were they safe? Would the release be stopped? Captain Ito appeared in the doorway, his expression troubled. There has been an incident. Commander Yamashiro is dead. The words hit like a physical blow. Several women gasped. He performed ritual suicide this morning, Captain Ito continued, his voice strained. He left a message stating that he could not bear the dishonor of defeat. He requested that his subordinate officers face trial for their actions during the war. Minji didn't know how to feel. Yamashiro had been their captor, the person who had made their lives miserable, but there was something almost tragic about his end. The processing will continue as scheduled, Captain Ito said, but I must inform you that as acting commander, I will be transported to the neutral station for a war crimes tribunal. Several other officers as well. He looked directly at Minji. You were present when I explained the military situation. I now ask something of you. Will you testify at my trial? Testify. Minji repeated, confused. I am guilty of keeping you prisoner under harsh conditions. This is fact. But I wish for the truth to be spoken. Not just accusations. I wish for you to tell exactly what happened here. Both the bad and any instances that showed honor. The request seemed strange. Why would he want prisoners to testify? What could they possibly say in his favor? Before Minji could respond, other women began speaking. "You should face justice for what you did to us," one woman said angrily. "We suffered. We watched people die." "He's right, though," Hana said quietly. "If there's a trial, shouldn't the truth be told?" "What truth?" someone demanded. "The truth is we were tortured, starved, and broken." "That's part of the truth," Salman said, speaking for the first time. "But not all of it." Everyone turned to look at her. "I've been documenting everything since we arrived," Salman continued. "I built a recording device from spare parts in the engineering shop. I've been hiding it in different locations, capturing audio and images. I have evidence of guard behavior, prisoner treatment, everything." Captain Ito stared at her. "That should have been impossible." "We searched regularly." "You searched for weapons and communication devices," Salman replied. "You didn't search for a camera made from recycling plant components and power cells from broken equipment." She pulled a small device from inside her uniform. It was crude, assembled from various pieces, but clearly functional. "Why?" Captain Ito asked. "Why document everything?" "Because I knew someday there would be questions. Someday we would go home, or we would die. And either way, someone needed to know what happened here." Salman looked at the device in her hand. "This contains everything. The beatings, the deaths, the cold nights, and bad food. But it also contains other things." She turned to Captain Ito. "It contains the time you stopped another guard from hitting a sick prisoner. The time you arranged for extra blankets during the worst of winter. The time you quietly left food near the medical wing when supplies were low." Captain Ito's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes. "It also contains footage of guards who were genuinely cruel," Salman continued. "Guards who enjoyed causing pain. Guards who should definitely face punishment." The room fell silent. Finally, Minji spoke. "I'll testify. But I'll tell the complete truth. The suffering we endured. The people we lost. But also moments when individual guards showed something that could be called mercy." "That's not enough," another woman protested. "They need to pay for what they did." "They will," Hana said firmly. "But there's a difference between justice and revenge. Justice means everyone gets judged fairly based on their actual actions. Revenge means we condemn them all equally, even if some tried to help." "How can you talk about fairness?" the woman demanded. "After what we've been through?" "Because that's what separates us from them," Minji said quietly. "The Takeshi invaded our worlds based on the belief that might makes right. That the strong can do whatever they want to the weak. If we respond with blind vengeance, we prove them right." She looked at Captain Ito. "But if we insist on real justice, on truth and fairness even after suffering, we prove that humanity is better. We prove that what we went through didn't break us." The women debated for hours. Some wanted all the Takeshi guards punished severely. Others saw wisdom in Minji's words. The discussion became heated, emotions running high. Finally, a vote was taken. 15 women agreed to provide testimony at the trials. They would speak honestly about their experiences, neither exaggerating crimes nor hiding moments of mercy. Soman agreed to provide her recordings as evidence. Captain Ito looked at them with an expression that might have been respect. "You were tortured, starved, imprisoned. Yet you choose to show us honor we did not show you. Why?" "Because we're human," Minji said simply. "We remember what was done to us. But we choose to be better anyway." The processing completed. The women were taken to transport ships. As they left the facility, Minji looked back one last time at the dark metal building that had been their prison. She thought about Yamashiro, who had chosen death over dishonor. She thought about Captain Ito, who would face trial. She thought about all the guards, some cruel and some conflicted. Most of all, she thought about what it meant to be human. Not human, as in weak or strong. Not human, as in victim or victor, but human, as in choosing morality, even when it would be easier to choose hate. The transport ship left Epsilon 7 behind. Through the windows, Minji watched the moon grow smaller. In a few days, they would reach the neutral station. After that, they would go home. But home would be different now. They were different now. The war had changed everything. As the ship accelerated toward the jump point, Hana sat down next to Minji. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Hana asked. "Agreeing to testify fairly?" "I don't know," Minji admitted. "But I know that if we had chosen revenge over justice, a part of us would have stayed in that prison forever. This way, we leave with our humanity intact." End quote. "Some people will be angry," Hana said. "Yes, some people will think we were too soft. That we should have demanded maximum punishment for everyone involved." "And what do you think?" Minji was quiet for a moment. "I think that the Takeshi studied humans and concluded we were weak. They were wrong. I think real strength isn't just about winning fights. It's about maintaining your principles even when you've suffered. It's about choosing what's right, even when what's easy would feel better." Hana nodded slowly. Around them, the other women were settling in for the journey. Some slept for the first time in months without fear. Others stared out the windows at the stars. A few cried quietly, releasing emotions they had suppressed for too long. They were going home. Not as broken victims, but as survivors who had chosen humanity over hate. That choice would define them in the years to come. 3 months had passed since Minji left Epsilon 7. 3 months of medical examinations, counseling sessions, and interviews. 3 months of slowly adjusting to freedom. She stood now at the landing port on New Seoul, watching ships come and go. The colony had been rebuilt after the Takeshi invasion. New buildings rose where old ones had been destroyed. Gardens grew in places that had been battlefields. Life had returned. But it was different life. Changed life. Minji's brother had survived. He had been held at a different facility and was released 2 weeks after her. Their reunion had been emotional, both of them crying and holding each other for a long time. But they both knew they weren't the same people who had been separated 6 months ago. Around her, thousands of people moved through the port, humans and, surprisingly, some Takeshi. The peace treaty had opened borders. Trade was beginning. Cultural exchange programs were starting. The galaxy was learning to coexist. Minji had testified at the war crimes tribunals as promised. She had told the complete truth about her experience. The harsh treatment, the deaths, the suffering, but also the moments when certain guards showed restraint or small kindnesses. The trials had been difficult. Some survivors were angry at her for not demanding maximum punishment. They felt betrayed by her balanced testimony. But others understood. Others saw that justice required truth, not revenge. Captain Ito had been found guilty of war crimes related to prisoner treatment. His sentence was reduced based on evidence of efforts to minimize suffering. He was serving time at a rehabilitation facility where Takeshi officers learned about human rights and dignity. Other guards received harsher sentences. The ones Saman's recordings showed, being deliberately cruel, faced decades of imprisonment. The tribunals had been fair, judging each person based on their individual actions. Minji heard footsteps behind her and turned. Hana approached, carrying a medical bag. "Ready?" Hana asked. Minji nodded. They were going to the trauma center Hana had established. It was located on the outskirts of the colony, a peaceful place designed to help former prisoners heal. The center was unique because it treated both humans and Takeshi. Hana had fought hard for that decision. Many people opposed it. Why should the enemy receive care? But Hana insisted that healing required breaking cycles of hatred. As they walked, Minji saw the changes in the colony. Memorial walls listed names of those who died during the invasion. Parks had been created in honor of fallen defenders. But there were also cooperation centers, where humans and Takeshi worked together on rebuilding projects. The trauma center was a beautiful building surrounded by gardens. Inside, counselors worked with patients in quiet rooms. Groups met to share experiences and support each other. In one of the gardens, Minji saw a familiar face. Yuna sat on a bench, talking with a young Takeshi female. They were discussing something from a tablet, both leaning forward with interest. Hana smiled. Yuna enrolled in the Diplomatic Corps training program. She says she wants to prevent future wars. The Takeshi woman is her study partner. How is Yuna doing? Minji asked. Better than most. The young ones adapt faster. She still has nightmares, but she's determined to move forward. They found Saman in the engineering workshop attached to the center. She was showing a group of students how to build communication devices from basic components. Her time in the prison had taught her to create technology from nothing, and now she was teaching others. The innovations Saman developed are being used across human space, Hana said. Her improvisation techniques are now part of engineering curriculum. Something good came from something terrible. After leaving the center, Minji traveled alone to a special location. It was several hours away by transport, but she had promised to go. The location was Epsilon 7, the moon where she had been imprisoned. The facility had been converted. Instead of a prison, it was now a university. Students from multiple species studied together. The dark metal building had been painted bright colors. The cell blocks had been transformed into dormitories. The work areas were now classrooms and laboratories. Minji walked through corridors she remembered. The path to the dining hall. The cell where she had slept. The yard where Yamashiro had announced their release. In the yard, a memorial had been erected. It listed the names of all who had died in the facility. Human and Takeshi names side by side. A reminder of the cost of war. A ceremony was scheduled for today. Minji was invited to speak. She stood at a podium as hundreds of people gathered. Former prisoners, former guards, students, teachers. A mixed crowd representing the new reality. 10 years ago, Minji began, her voice steady. I was brought to this place as a prisoner. I was scared. I was angry. I didn't think I would survive. She paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. This facility was meant to break us. To prove that humans were weak. To show that the Takeshi Empire was unstoppable. But something unexpected happened. We didn't break. Despite the cold, the hunger, the fear, we held on to something essential. We held on to our humanity. And when we were told we could go home, we thought it was a lie. Because the truth seemed impossible. The truth was that humanity had won. Not through superior weapons. Not through better tactics. But through adaptation, determination, and refusing to accept defeat. She looked at a section where several Takeshi sat, including former guards. The Takeshi Empire learned something important during that war. They learned that strength isn't just about force. That winning isn't just about conquering. They learned that humans have a quality that makes us dangerous to fight, but valuable as allies. We learn. We adapt. We survive. And most importantly, we choose mercy, even after suffering. When we were released, we could have demanded vengeance. Some of us wanted to. But we chose justice instead. We chose to judge individuals based on their actions, not their species. We chose to be better than our anger. She gestured to the transformed facility around them. This place used to be a symbol of oppression. Now it's a symbol of cooperation. Students from Earth and the Takeshi homeworld study side by side. Former enemies learn from each other. The guards who worked here are gone. Some faced justice. Some work now in rehabilitation. One, Captain Ito, actually teaches at this university. He teaches courses on human psychology and cultural understanding, helping ensure future Takeshi never make the same mistakes. There was some murmuring in the crowd. Not everyone approved of Ito's position. But Minji continued. Change is hard, Forgiveness is harder. Moving forward after trauma is the hardest thing of all. But it's necessary. We can't forget what happened here. We shouldn't forget. The memorial behind me ensures we never will. But we also can't let the past trap us. We must remember the suffering to prevent future suffering. We must remember the mistakes so we don't repeat them. But we must also remember that we survived. We won. And we chose to build something better. She looked directly at the students in the crowd. Young faces, full of hope. You represent the future. A future where different species don't automatically see each other as enemies. Where conflicts are resolved through dialogue, not war. Where strength is measured not just in military power but in wisdom, compassion, and cooperation. The war taught both our species hard lessons. The Takeshi learned that humans cannot be easily conquered. We learned that victory without mercy is hollow. So I stand here today, 10 years after my imprisonment. Not with bitterness, but with hope. This place that was meant to break us has become a place that builds understanding. They told us we could go home. We thought it was a lie. But the real truth was more complex. Home wasn't just a place we could return to. Home was something we carried inside us. Our humanity. Our principles. Our refusal to let circumstances define us. We went home. But we also brought home with us. And now we're building new homes. Better homes. Homes where former enemies can become partners in peace. Minji stepped down from the podium. The crowd applauded. Some enthusiastically. Others more reservedly. Not everyone agreed with her message. But that was okay. Progress wasn't about everyone agreeing. It was about everyone choosing dialogue over violence. After the ceremony, someone approached her. It was Captain Ito, older now, wearing teacher's clothing instead of a uniform. "Thank you for your words," he said quietly. "And thank you for your testimony 10 years ago. It gave me a chance at redemption." "Are you finding it?" Minji asked. "Redemption? I'm trying. I teach students about the mistakes we made, about the assumptions that led to war. I hope that by educating the next generation, I can prevent future conflicts. That's all any of us can do," Minji said. "Learn from the past and try to build a better future." As Ito walked away, Hana appeared beside Minji. "Do you think it's working?" Hana asked. "This peace we're building?" Minji looked around at the transformed facility. At the mixed crowd of humans and Takeshi talking, laughing, learning together. At the memorial that honored the dead without demanding continued hatred. "It's working," she said. "Not perfectly. Not easily. But it's working. Some days I still have nightmares," Hana admitted. "Some days I remember the cold, the hunger, the fear." "Me too," Minji said. "We all do. Trauma doesn't just disappear. But we're not trapped by it. We survived the imprisonment. We're surviving the aftermath. And we're building something meaningful from the experience." They stood together in silence, two survivors, looking at the future they had helped create. The sun was setting on Epsilon 7, casting long shadows across the university grounds. Students hurried to evening classes. Teachers prepared lessons. In gardens that used to be punishment yards, flowers bloomed. Minji thought about that day 10 years ago when the guards said they could go home. The disbelief, the fear, the impossible hope. She had gone home. But more than that, she had carried home with her the strength, the humanity, the choice to be better than her circumstances. That choice had defined the last 10 years. It would define the years to come. The Japanese guard had said they could go home. They had thought it was a lie. But the truth was more profound than anyone expected. They could go home. And they could transform what home meant for everyone. For the first time in 6 months, Minji allowed herself to hope.